Azure Database Interview Questions. What is Azure SQL Database? Azure SQL Database is a fully managed relational database service in Azure that offers high availability, scalability, and security for SQL Server workloads. What is Azure Cosmos DB? Azure Cosmos DB is a globally distributed, multi-model database service that provides high availability, low latency, and scalability for NoSQL workloads. What is Azure Database for MySQL? Azure Database for MySQL is a fully managed database service that provides a MySQL-compatible relational database in the cloud. What is Azure Database for PostgreSQL? Azure Database for PostgreSQL is a fully managed database service that provides a PostgreSQL-compatible relational database in the cloud. What is Azure SQL Managed Instance? Azure SQL Managed Instance is a fully managed SQL Server instance that allows you to migrate SQL Server workloads to Azure with minimal changes. What is Azure SQL Data Warehouse? Azure SQL Data Warehouse is a fully managed, scalable data warehousing service that allows you to process and analyze large volumes of data. What are the benefits of using Azure Database Services? Azure Database Services offer automated management, scaling, backup, high availability, security, and integration with other Azure services. Explain the concept of Azure Database Elastic Pools. Azure Database Elastic Pools allow you to manage a pool of databases with a set of resources, sharing resources among databases based on demand. What is the difference between Azure SQL Database and SQL Server in an Azure VM? Azure SQL Database is a fully managed database service, while SQL Server in an Azure VM requires you to manage the VM and SQL Server software. What is the purpose of Azure Database Migration Service? Azure Database Migration Service simplifies the process of migrating on-premises databases to Azure by providing a guided migration experience. How does Azure SQL Database ensure high availability? Azure SQL Database uses automated backups, automatic failover, and multiple replicas to ensure high availability and data durability. What is Azure SQL Database Geo-replication? Azure SQL Database Geo-replication allows you to replicate databases across different Azure regions for disaster recovery and data availability. How does Azure Cosmos DB ensure global distribution and low latency? Azure Cosmos DB uses a multi-model, multi-API architecture and offers global distribution with multiple consistency models to achieve low latency data access. What is Azure Database for MariaDB? Azure Database for MariaDB is a fully managed database service that provides a MariaDB-compatible relational database in the cloud. How does Azure SQL Managed Instance simplify database management? Azure SQL Managed Instance provides fully isolated and secure environments with automatic patching, maintenance, and compatibility support for SQL Server workloads. What is the difference between horizontal and vertical scaling in databases? Horizontal scaling involves adding more instances to distribute the load, while vertical scaling involves increasing the resources of a single instance. What is Azure SQL Database Hyperscale? Azure SQL Database Hyperscale is designed for large databases, with a distributed architecture that enables automatic scaling and high-performance backups. Explain the concept of Azure SQL Database Managed Private Endpoints. Azure SQL Database Managed Private Endpoints allow you to access the database over a private IP address within your virtual network, enhancing security. What is Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server? Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server is a fully managed, configurable database service that provides more control over the database configuration. What is the role of Azure Cache for Redis? Azure Cache for Redis is an in-memory data store that provides low-latency access to frequently used data, improving application performance. What is Azure SQL Database Serverless? Azure SQL Database Serverless is a compute tier that automatically scales based on demand, making it cost-effective for sporadic workloads. What are Azure SQL Database automatic tuning features? Azure SQL Database automatic tuning includes features like automatic index management and automatic plan correction to improve database performance. How does Azure SQL Data Warehouse distribute and process data? Azure SQL Data Warehouse uses massively parallel processing (MPP) architecture to distribute and process data across multiple compute nodes. What is the difference between Azure SQL Data Warehouse and Azure SQL Database? Azure SQL Data Warehouse is designed for analytical workloads, while Azure SQL Database is a fully managed relational database service for transactional workloads. What is Azure Database for Cassandra? Azure Database for Cassandra is a fully managed NoSQL database service that provides Apache Cassandra compatibility. How can you ensure data security in Azure Database Services? Azure Database Services offer features like encryption at rest, encryption in transit, firewalls, and role-based access control for data security. What are Azure SQL Database Performance Recommendations? Azure SQL Database Performance Recommendations offer insights and suggestions to improve the performance of your databases. How does Azure SQL Managed Instance support SQL Server features and applications? Azure SQL Managed Instance supports most SQL Server features and applications with minimal changes, providing compatibility for migration. What is the purpose of Azure Database Advisor? Azure Database Advisor provides intelligent performance recommendations to optimize your database workloads. What is Azure Arc-enabled data services? Azure Arc-enabled data services extend Azure Database Services to on-premises and multi-cloud environments, providing a consistent experience. Thanks for watching.